Czech Premium Pale Lager is a style that melds cracker-like flavours from Pilsner malt with the spicy and floral notes characteristic of Saaz hops, and while it's traditionally brewed with quite a bit of fuss, decoction mash and cool fermentation, I'm brewing one short and shoddy style, 30-minute mash, 25-minute boil, warm fermentation. And while I'd normally be confident of a good outcome, Marshall already brewed this style short and shoddy, and the beer...
It smelled like new shoes.
But I have a working theory as to what went wrong. Marshall's recipe used Saaz exclusively, and that meant using a lot of Saaz hops for bittering. Could the sheer amount of hop material be contributing to the problem? One way to find out. I'm brewing this beer with a different hop schedule and sending it to Marshall to ask him, is this still giving you new shoe vibes?
Well...
My name's Martin Keane, and this is the Brewlosophy Show. Short and shoddy brew days waste no time, so let's get going. I added reverse osmosis water to my brew kettle, and shooting for a Bohemian Pilsner water profile, added my water salts, which mainly consisted of calcium chloride. The grist could not be simpler for this one, 11 pounds of Pilsner malt in this 5-gallon batch. Now I'm going to mash this at 152 Fahrenheit, that's 67 Celsius, for an abbreviated 30 minutes. Set the timer for 30 minutes.
30 minutes, counting down.
And while that's mashing, let's talk hops. So what potential issues are there in using a whole bunch of hops for the bittering addition? Well, fundamentally, the bitterness imparted in a beer is the function of the alpha acid of the hops added and the time those hops spend in solution. Different hops have different alpha acids. Hersbrucker hops, for example, they're typically around 2 to 3% alpha acid. Summit hops will get you closer to around 17%. So if we're chasing a particular IBU rating, there's a simple calculation to derive the size of the hop addition using that alpha acid rating. So for example, if I'm chasing 40 IBU of bitterness from a single bittering hop addition added at 60 minutes, I'd need perhaps 135 grams of Hersbrucker or 22 grams of Summit in a 19-litre batch. That's 6 times more hops for the same level of bitterness. Now, you might have heard some concerns about adding too many hops into the boil. The vegetable matter of hops could potentially lead to undesirable flavours, think cooked cabbage. Now, a Brewlosophy experiment was conducted to test this out. The contributor, Ray, brewed up 2 Vienna lagers. Both had the same IBU, but one with a 60-gram hop addition of Saaz and the other with a 14-gram addition of Magnum. Both hops were added as a 60-minute bittering addition. And the result? Could tasters reliably distinguish between the two beers? Well, 17 participants received samples, of which 10 participants would have to accurately identify the odd beer out for significance. But only 8 did, suggesting tasters were unable to reliably distinguish a beer bittered with a lower amount of high alpha acid hops, with one bittered with a higher amount of low alpha acid hops. Ray did conclude that while he too could not reliably distinguish the beers, his somewhat biased impression was that the beer bittered with Magnum was slightly crisper and had a cleaner bitterness. And in order to hopefully avoid a repeat of the new shoes quality to my beer, I too am going to attempt to replace a large bittering addition of Saaz with a smaller addition of Magnum. So my hops, I've got my Magnum and my Saaz. I'm going for an IBU of around 37, 38. So the Magnum, the bittering hop, I'm adding 28 grams of that. That's going to give me around 30 IBU of bitterness. Then I've got 50 grams of Saaz, which will go in at 10 minutes, and then 30 grams of Saaz, which will go with 2 minutes left of the boil. Now, let's get this thing out, and I'm going to add my Magnum bittering addition right now. We're not at boil yet, I'm coming up to boil. But this is actually a first wort hop, which means it goes in while we're coming up to boil, rather than once we've started. So in it goes. I was curious to know if Marshall thought this new hop schedule would fix the problems that he experienced with this beer.
I'm not sure if using Magnum as a bittering hop is going to be the fix to the problem, because I'm too afraid to admit that maybe I was wrong in my diagnosis of what the problem was in using too many Saaz, but I think it could help.
Hey, Marshall, while you're here, do you think you could do that Patreon thing you do on the podcast?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. If you're a fan of this show and you'd like to receive a reward for your support, consider becoming a patron of Brewlosophy over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy. By making a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world.
Well, that was fast. So for the yeast, I am using Yeast 2278. This is Czech Pils. Now, Yeast, tell me I want to ferment this around 10 to 14 Celsius. Nonsense. I'm going to ferment this warm at 21 Celsius. Actually, this is the first time I think I've ever done a warm fermentation for a lager yeast. So kind of curious to see how that goes. Now, obviously, if you are chilling stuff yourself and you're just using tap water like I'm doing right now, getting down to lager temperatures can be a real pain, so you can save a lot of time by really pitching at room temperature. I have a glycol system and it doesn't really save me any time at all to pitch at 21C or 14C, but what the heck. I'm about 10 Fahrenheit too warm, 81 Fahrenheit right now. So I'm going to put this on my glycol chiller, then add the yeast once it's chilled. Now, this was the very first beer I brewed for Brewlosophy, and truthfully, I was a little bit anxious to expose it to Marshall's evaluation. So first, I decided to run it by my buddy Norm. So I haven't told you what this beer is.
No, you haven't.
Maybe let's just try it and see what you think first of all.
You're not trying to slip in like a Goza or a sour rum.
No, I would never.
Okay.
I would
All
never.
Right. As long as you're not doing that, I'm good. It smells a little fruity.
A touch.
Yeah, it really does. It smells a little fruity. I'm dying to try it. Can we take a sip?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do this. Exactly what you would expect from a lager. On the finish, you're getting a little bit of malt, but God, that's really good, Martin.
So far, so good. All right, it's finally time to face the music and see if Marshall is getting new shoe vibes from my beer. You ready to crack this open?
I am ready to crack this beer open, Martin. I've been excited to drink this for a while, ever since you sent it to me.
Well, I'd hate for you to drink alone, so let's go for it.
Cheers, let's do this.
Oh, look at that.
It is very carbonated, Martin. I would refer to this as homebrew bright, which basically just means it's not a commercial beer and it's basically bright. The haze, any haze is just coming from the condensation.
See if you're getting those new shoe vibes.
I'm not getting any new shoe vibes. Would you like to hear what I'm getting?
Please.
It smells like it was bittered with Magnum. No, I'm just kidding.
Impressive.
No, it smells exactly like what I expect from a Saaz hopped beer, a lager that's hopped with Saaz. I get a little bit of like hydrangea floral, that kind of floral hydrangea. It's very nostalgic for me, actually. And really clean white bread malt character.
Well,
I want to drink it.
let's do that.
I'm trying to find a fault with it. It's just super clean. And I love it. It tastes exactly how it smells. I get a little hint of that kind of alcohol fruity thing, but just on the finish. Reminds me a little bit of a Dortmunder Export, but just a hair. I mean, it's in line with a Dortmunder Export, but made with Saaz, basically.
This was an hour and a half of my work, you know. It was short mash,
That's
short
it.
boil, done.
Easy.
And to have something like this just from such a short brew day is just, I think that's just fantastic. Do we think we got to the bottom of this then? Do we think that the reason was probably just too many hops for bittering in such a short boil?
I'm hesitant to settle on that being the ultimate solution. It could have been a yeast-related thing. It could have been something else, of course. But based on what I've perceived in prior batches where I've used a ton of Saaz hops throughout the boil, as well as my short and shoddy batch, and then comparing it to what I'm perceiving in this one, which still used a decent amount of Saaz hops, right? I mean, it wasn't low. I think that we may be onto something. Learn more about becoming a patron and check out all of the rewards we offer for your support over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy.
That's so funny.